Welcome to the Extinction Level Event Podcast. I am your host, the Barrelman. We have had some confirmations in the Trump cabinet, and one of the confirmations that we have talked about before is the RFK Jr. Department of Health and Human Services. Now, I am not sure what the scope of the Department of Health and Human Services on large. I work for the Department of Health and Human Services now, but I'm entry level on the county, in a county building. I'm not federal, I'm not state, I'm on the county level. So I don't have access to all the things that they're talking about. We don't have anything to do with what gets approved or not. That's supposed to be stuff like the FDA approves that, not the Department of Health and Human Services. Why we're even talking about it, I'm not sure. We have a behavioral branch. We have, was it it's not physical. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it's a place where you go if you need medical, not really attention. It's not a hospital, but they can do some vaccines and stuff like that. They can do some minor treatments in that place. We have a place for we deal with child welfare. We deal with adult protective services. We have food stamps. CalFresh is what it's called in our department. We have CalWorks, which is money assistance programs for families. If you do not have a family and you're on your own, we have general relief or general assistance, however you want to look at it. I guess it'll depend on where it is as to what it's called. And those things are determined by an eligibility worker. And I think I said CalFresh, right, which is food stamps, what they call food stamps. Essentially, we are the welfare office is what we are. And that's where I work. Like I said, I know there's other stuff. There's a man there who deals with housing for individuals without families, and he deals with that kind of thing and trying to get people in, to move off the streets into apartments. We try to help people who are having problems. We also do Medi-Cal, which is essentially Medicaid, but for California. So we basically help a lot of people, but at no point do we mention anything about vaccines or anything. Do we have anything really to do with that? I know, I think it's called public assistance. Is that it? Public something? Public health, I think is what it's called, public health. And that deals a little bit. I know they said they had some stuff there, but that's not really what they're about. They're mostly about information, training people what good health is, how they should be not, telling people how to live, but just helping them in trying to be healthier overall. Doing those sorts of things to, assist them and make life better and healthier and whatnot. So we deal with a lot of different stuff, but I'm not really saying it must be more on the federal side as far as deciding on actual vaccines. Like we can either apply them or not at the public health place, I would assume, but we don't make the actual overall decisions as to nobody gets them or whatnot, or whether we're going to do the flu this season or not. So I'm not sure where that department runs into that. But again, it's got to be more on the federal level than the county where I work. Having said that, having any influence whatsoever on that, as we seem to be having with RFK, and just him coming in now, and of course the general proliferation of the anti vaccine and anti, doing anything really to help people in the medical world, is already having an impact, right? We're already impacting that because there's been a lot of opinions flying around, especially there was some anyways from the vaccine gave my kid autism. I think that was before COVID. I think COVID came along and really exacerbated the whole thing with the mRNA thing, which nobody really understood. Um, I did a lot of research. I did a whole podcast on it from back in the before days. I don't believe we're going to go over that today. A lot of scientific information in that. Essentially, mRNA is part of your body. Like it's inside of you right now, made by your own body. Your body uses mRNA. It's not a strange substance that somebody just puts in and forces you to have that you don't normally have. mRNA is just part of your body and how it works. And a lot of people think that these viruses, the vaccines are like an antivenom. Like there's some sort of medicine that you put in that fights the bacteria or the viruses or whatever. But that's wrong. That's not how it works. What happens is that these vaccines teach your body how to fight it. Your body fights it. All natural, exactly the way it normally does. It's just sometimes your body doesn't recognize a bad thing as a bad thing. So all the vaccines do is basically say, hey, this thing that you've just been letting go willy-nilly, yeah, that's bad. You need to do something about that. And then through that, your body will adapt and change and learn to get rid of those things and maybe not have much of an impact on your health at all. So it is not the vaccine that you get shot up with that does anything. That's one of the biggest problems that people have understanding. They're thinking, we shoot this medicine in you and we don't know what it actually does. No. All it does, all of them, is teach your body how it's supposed to get rid of them. And it doesn't give your body new tools. It simply teaches your body how to use the tools it already has. So that's one of the biggest things people don't understand, and they're all freaked out because they think it puts some sort of weird poison in you that may work, or maybe a Bill Gates microchip nanobot, whatever. But no, these things instruct your body how to deal with these things the way it normally would, anyways. But it sometimes doesn't, understand that an invader is an invader and what it should do about it. So that's what we do, especially with the the mRNAs. It basically is a set of instructions that tells your body, okay, this is how you kill these things. And your body goes, oh, and then your body sends Rambo, But that's a natural Rambo that your body created, not the virus, not the vaccine. None of those things created Rambo. Your body creates Rambo. We just teach it how to build Rambo, right? Using what's already in your body. So I'm explaining that because I'm not going to go into the whole thing like I did in the previous podcast that I did about it. This time we're going to focus more like I also did this in the previous, but we're going to focus more on the actual dangers of disease itself, because the problem here isn't, we're either going to all get more flu or we're not going to get more flu. Measles is obviously not a good thing, but, measles has been around and done all this. The real problem, much like with my podcast that I did on I can't remember what I called it, but it had to do with the top 10 more potent greenhouse gases. The top 10 greenhouse gases that are more potent than carbon dioxide, right? These ones that we need so little of them that have such a massive impact that we're just not talking about, because all we're talking about is carbon dioxide. We're missing the trees for the forest, in a matter of speaking. So to me, that's what we're looking at. We need to look at these outliers, the things that aren't coming up, the things that aren't necessarily fully in our face, because all those things we know about, all those things we're being told about, all those things everybody's already got their opinions on. And we need to look at these things that aren't necessarily on the top of the agenda for people. They're not necessarily looking for them. Haven't necessarily heard of them, but we need to, because these are problems and these scenarios in which case the problems are going to occur. So the first thing we need to really talk about here, I think, is a situation, because this can be both a primary and a secondary apocalypse. So let's talk about the secondary apocalypse first, because it's a lot more complicated. And then we'll talk about the primary, which obviously, when it comes to like viruses, you get a virus, you die. That's just how it's a primary apocalypse. The secondary is a little bit trickier. So let's say somebody, for some reason, decided to cut out, I don't know, like $880 billion out of a healthcare system that, millions and millions of poor people cling to because they can't afford anything else. Let's say somebody was to do something like that. Well, what would that cause, right? What would happen in that particular scenario? Well, you're going to have a whole lot more people who can't afford to go to the hospital. And that means more death, more people dying. And you might think, well, people die all the time. That's just going to be more of that. What you're thinking of is an infinitely scalable system. And we'll get into the whole scalability of things. I've got that on the page. But the problem is that we don't have an infinitely scalable system. We will max out on these things. It happened during COVID, where we pushed the limits of what we had. Now, obviously, we were all focused on that one thing. So we were able to kind of bring things to bear and come out with things. And obviously, all the things we needed were exactly the same. So we had a run on these like very few things that everybody needed and ran out. And this will be a little bit different, because it'll be a whole lot of different things that people need, but we still will run out. And more importantly, the hospitals are going to run out of room. They're going to run out of supplies. And maybe more important than any of that, they're going to run out of people to treat you. People treating you can take meager supplies, if they know what they're doing, and help you make it through till they can either get better supplies or maybe just give you that little bit more of a chance that you can just fight the thing and get better on your own. But if you don't have the people there to take those supplies that normally would not be helpful enough, you're not going to make it. You're just going to die. There are lots and lots of people. You can look up the statistics. I did not myself, of how many people die because they do not get medical treatment just based on something like religious grounds. They're just like, I don't believe in it, so I'm not going to get further treatment, and die from that. And then add on all the people who died because they didn't seek proper medical treatment simply because they didn't have the ability to, whether it was because they were in a rural area and couldn't get to medical treatment soon enough, or because they couldn't afford it and decided dying was better than living for the rest of their lives in, debt. Not a little bit of debt, like overwhelmingly crushing debt, right? And we're not even going to count the people who died just because they weren't discovered in time. Like, obviously, that can also be helped with proper infrastructure. We can find out when somebody is in trouble and needing an ambulance and all that sooner, with proper, infrastructure and having people going around it and being on alert and in the right area at the right time. That would definitely be helpful. But setting that aside, right? We'll set those deaths aside, because no matter what you do, you're probably going to get some of those kinds of deaths that just happen to die in the middle of the woods and nobody's going to notice, right? So, and we don't count those against the system, as it were. Preventable though they may be to some extent, they're also inevitable. But simply allowing people to die because they didn't get health care, allowing people to die because they don't believe in healthcare, those are going to be big numbers of which we don't need to have. As an advanced modern society, those deaths are not only preventable, but shouldn't even be a factor at this point. One thing that contributes greatly to it is obviously taking away people's ability to access healthcare, and another thing is misinformation. So, those two things are going to be some of the greatest enemies we have to getting people proper medical attention. So, what I want to talk about today isn't even just the numbers of people that we could be saving. I want to go beyond that, because when we start cutting systems to the point where we don't have enough people, we don't have enough infrastructure, and we don't have enough support systems for people, what we're going to end up with is a lot of death. It is going to overwhelm the system. And it could have a sort of a slippery slope, spiraling out of control, exponentially degrading effect on society. We're going to get into Captain Tripp's scenario. We're going to get to that point where bodies will pile up in the streets. There will not be people who can get them out of there. There will not be people who can find a place to store them, to properly dispose of them. Not even giant funeral pyres are going to be able to do this. And the reason is because dead bodies themselves are dangers. If you have a dead body, you are polluting your environment. There are diseases of which are deadly that you can contract from this, and we're going to go into this. Now, dead bodies are not quite as bad as I had first thought, or I had heard at least. For instance, they said the plague, don't go near dead bodies because we get the plague. I don't actually know if that is or is not true. I haven't looked into it yet. But if that's true, then just having dead bodies around that have the plague is going to make sure everybody gets the plague, right? But dead bodies can get stuff, and that's one of the first articles we're gonna look at here is dead bodies, because they're both more dangerous and less dangerous than I had assumed. But they're not good, and when they start piling up, they pose an exponential threat, because those dead bodies can lead to more dead bodies, can lead to more dead bodies. All suddenly, everybody's dying because so many people have died around them. Death begets death. And so I want to, in this podcast, we're going to talk about some of those dangers. And we're going to talk about, what this apocalypse is going to look like, the shape and color and taste and texture and all that. Not really. I'm kidding, but you know what I mean. We're gonna spell it out for you exactly why this is a potential apocalypse, and why primary apocalypse is bad, but maybe not quite as potential as a secondary apocalypse. When we start taking away food for people so they starve to death, medical attention so they die of fixable injuries, when we take away money for shelter so they die of hypothermia and other exposure-related events, when they die from toil because their commanders have decreed that they should work a 12-hour day until their back breaks and they can no longer move. And once that's happened, they are just disregarded and thrown to the side. People will think, well, that's happened before and we lived through it. Yeah, that happened when your big city had several thousand people, maybe even 100,000 people in them. I mean, that's like big capital city numbers. We've got millions of people. I think some places in Asia have billions of people in a single place. Like not one tower, obviously, but like a city or a metropolis. That is a huge number of people dying, not just 1,000 people that would just bury in the back and don't really tell anybody. You're talking 10,000, 100,000. You don't have enough room for mass graves for the amount of people that are going to be buried. That will then seep into the systems that you have, into your food, the crops you grow, into the water you drink, that into the animals around you. That will then destroy. And you're thinking, well, we'll get rid of the animals. Really? How are you going to live when the entire ecosystem around you breaks down? You think all you need is a little nitrate fixing, a little bit of carbon, you know, whatever it is that you want to put in the ground for fertilizer, and everything's okay? Because that's not how it works. If that soil is bad, you are not going to have a good crop. You cannot make soil good soil. You can add to soil to make it better. But if your soil is crap, you're not growing anything. And soil degrades over time. So you can't just reuse it. We learned that in the Dust Bowl. Of course, now with, modern things like, putting all the nitrates in there that are now running off into and the fertilizers that are running off into the oceans and acidifying our oceans and poisoning the hell out of all of us, right? With that, we were able to keep another Dust Bowl from happening so far. But the Dust Bowl happened because soil degrades and we need to keep it good. So, if you think getting rid of those animals is just, well, now we don't have diseased animals around us, it's going to be okay. They're part of an ecosystem that keeps that soil from degrading. From down to the little earthworms that you probably think are just stupid and why are they even in there? They're helping you have healthy soil. That's what they're doing in there. And by destroying any major part of that system, it will entirely break down and you will not survive. You can't just get rid of people, get rid of the diseased animals that it creates, get rid of the, poison water that it creates, and all of a sudden we're cool. You are going to have an exponential death spiral that will be created from just, doing like the Harry Potter, was it the Ministry of Magic when Voldemort took over and whatever the hell that doofus's name was that was ruling in his stead. I can't remember. And they walked in, in disguise, and they saw people squished in the statue with some people, and they're like, what is that? And it said, it's muggles in their proper place, right? Being crushed by the authoritarian wizards. The purebloods, of course, just certain ones, not all of them. So that's going to be the 99% is what it's going to be. That's not going to be the muggles. That's the 99% of people who aren't the 1%. If we're lucky, it's only 97%. Still, 97%. That's no big deal, right? I mean, we got an extra 2% out of it. Yeah, I honestly don't know what to say to people who would think that way. I hope there isn't people who actually think that way. I suspect there are, though. And I don't care how much you increase that percentage. 10, 20, whatever. The number that you put at the bottom is too big, period. But especially if it's half or even close to half, just throwing people's lives away. Your life is a life any more than anybody else's. Even if you don't have empathy or sympathy, you got to realize life is a chance, man. You throw a coin, you toss it in the air or flick it or flip it and do whatever you want with it. Throw dice. You cannot simply predict. You can have a prediction table. You can say, oh, well, this is more likely to happen. That absolutely. Probabilities are a thing. But you don't know for sure. And you could be one of that 60% that's getting crushed, even if you think there's no way. I'm sorry, but there's a way. There's always a way. Why don't you try Googling some of the people who have had it really good and all of a sudden ended up on the bottom? And not just because they did something stupid, but because something happened. Somebody got cancer. Somebody was invested in the wrong firm that just not only collapsed, but had legal troubles. So you weren't just able to just pull your funds out and move on to the next one. You got brought low because of that for something that wasn't even in your hands. There are tons of people and stories out there who thought, this won't happen to me. I have a secure future. I'm up in the top percents. Therefore, it won't be me, so I don't care. You should care because that is tenuous. It may be only temporary. Because let's say 60% of us, is in the poverty lane now, and we're all getting crushed underfoot. Well, let's say 20% of those people die. All suddenly, that's 60%. That's starting to get closer and closer to you now, buddy. You're starting to get into that lower 60% as the cap for the 60% gets higher. Now let's kill another 20%. Uh-oh. You're in the bottom 60%. Oh, man, darn. Oh, well. So don't just count on, necessarily being saved. So all of these things that are happening that are contributing to a system that will cause death are in fact going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy of destruction for our species. And once those 60% die and start infecting everything around you, you're next. Because the infections that come from it, the poisons, the corruption of everything around, the befoulment that the body creates, you're going to have to be in that. And no amount of filtering, no amount of trying to have a clean harvest, no amount of staying inside away from all of the infected animals and everything is going to save you. There will be airborne disease pathogens that will come along and poisons, things that you will not just be able to filter out. There may be some people who have filters good enough, but those filters will break down over time because that's how filters work. Filters pull things out of the air, but they don't disappear. They've got to be trapped in the filters, which means filters clog up and they get used up. Well, guess what? All those people who used to build those filters, they're dead. They're gone. Robots broke down. They're just rusted out machines now. You've got no filter now. Now you just got to breathe that air. Oh, I hope it's good by now. Oh, people are still dying? I guess not. We're all dead. People don't see past the end of their nose sometimes. That happened to somebody else. It doesn't have anything to do with me. Sometimes you are right. Sometimes a few people dying somewhere, you'll probably never even notice it. You should, because those lives matter. But I get it if it doesn't and you don't pay attention. But we increase that scale high enough, and we're not talking that it has to be 60%. That's just an example. You will feel it. Period. It will filter in, just like the tariffs that are being put on and taken off and put on and taken off. You think that the stock market falling down like that, but then coming back will have no lasting effect? Wait. All those billions that those guys at the top are making off of this, they're not coming out of thin air. We're not inventing that money. That money is there because they're taking it from other people. They're not giving it back. That's going to drop a lot of people into poverty. It's going to kill a lot of businesses. It's going to destroy economies. And it's going to send people on the spiraling death charge into oblivion. So keep that in mind, because these are a lot of the factors that create this as a secondary apocalypse. All right? Not a primary, but a secondary. Primary is obviously bad as well, but primary is a little bit more cut and dry. We understand. You get Ebola and you die. Like, then the next person gets, like, we all get Ebola and we die. That's a primary apocalypse. That's pretty bad. But when people just get poor and die, and then Ebola comes and ravages everybody, and we're like, oh crap. And they're like, yeah, well, unfortunately we killed half these people. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had this Ebola. And you're like, oh, uh-oh. Yeah. right? Okay. So let's get into the first actual article, shall we? Because again, this is, I looked up, the title here even says Risks Posed by Dead Bodies After Disasters. So this is good because this is something I've been curious about for a while. Again, it's you have a ton of dead bodies, what's going to happen? So we're going to talk about these dead bodies. Now, keep in mind, this is after disasters, so these are specific circumstances in a modern world, for the most part, in which we can take these bodies and dispose of them properly, for the most part, even if it takes time. But if we scale this up high enough, those things won't happen. And I don't know if this will get into some of the scenarios where it doesn't happen or can't happen quickly, but we'll see. Okay. So as usual, we're going to read the first paragraph because it's usually kind of an abstract, synopsis of a lot of the other article, and then we can just look through and you know, get through some of the details that are pertinent. Contrary to common belief, there is no evidence that corpses pose a risk of endemic disease after a natural disaster. Most agents do not survive long in the human body after death. Human remains only pose a substantial risk to health in a few special cases, such as death from cholera or hemorrhagic fevers. I believe the bubonic plague was a hemorrhagic fever, so that would make sense. I can't say for sure. I know you have the pustules that are the name of the Black Death, the bubonic plague, the bubons or whatever they called them. That's those black things. But I don't know if it was literally hemorrhagic or not. Workers who routinely handle corpses may, however, risk contracting tuberculosis, blood-borne viruses like hepatitis B, C, and HIV, and gastrointestinal infections like cholera, E. coli, hepatitis, which we went over already. Well, this is A. Rotavirus, diarrhea, which is more of a symptom than I don't know what causes it if it's an actual virus, but salmonella, shigellosis, and typhoid. Oh, that's fun. Tuberculosis can be acquired if the bacillus is aerosolized. Oh, well, at least you can get away from it by getting away from the body, right? Residual air in lungs, exhaled fluid from lungs spurted out through the nose or mouth during handling of the corpse. Blood-borne viruses can be transmitted via direct contact of non-intact skin or mucous membranes from splashing blood or blood. In other words, if you have a cut or something, I think it's obvious that's going to be a point of weakness for your body. But you can just inhale it because the blood vessels are so close to, say, your nose, or other orifices that may be exposed that you're not really thinking about. And you're like, I didn't stick the arm in my butt. What's that? Well, okay, but your butt is still in your pants, and it's not airtight. You're not a frog. Like, stuff can still get in when it's aerosolized around you, or a bit of, mucus got on your pants or something. All orifices are fair game for this kind of thing. Gastrointestinal infections can easily be transmitted from feces leaked from dead bodies. In other words, you can get rid of the dead bodies, and there can still be like poop and piss and all that all over the place. You're not necessarily going to notice. You might just bury it. You're not necessarily going to take all the poop with you, especially if it's like just a smear over here or something. That's still a disease vector there, right? A lot of things that people don't even think about. It's like, oh, well, there's just a little smear of brown. Well, what am I supposed to do about it? Spend 5,000 hours over here trying to clean every little bit up? No, let's get the bodies, get out of here. Burn them, right? Meanwhile, you're leaving potential disease vectors behind. Right? Transmission occurs via the fecal-oral route through the direct contact with the body, soil, clothes, or contaminated vehicles or equipment. You don't even have to touch the body, right? GI infections can also be spread as a result of contamination of the water supply with dead bodies. So if somebody dies in the water, doesn't matter how big, well, obviously the ocean, right? Dead bodies die in the ocean all the time, although there's obviously a area of effect in the disease vectors of that, right? But, most bodies of water, including underground aquifers, are not necessarily going to be big enough that you're not going to be hit with these diseases when a dead body dies. And some of that body, if not all of it, or just fecal matter or whatever, seeps into that aquifer. And now everybody on a well system is going to get poisoned by it. They're not going to know it. They're not going to know where it came from. There's not going to be any warning. They're just going to be drinking one day and it's poisoned the next. All right. So after that, they just give advice for handling bodies, specific advice for handling corpses and stuff, which is good. It's good information, but it's not necessarily information we're looking into at this moment. All right. This is talking about viruses here. Going long, viruses linger with lasting impact. Some viruses, like the common cold, are a flash in the pan. They infect us, our bodies fight back, which is what makes us sick, and they're gone until the next variant rolls along. Other viruses linger. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, the reason this is important is because, especially with things like it was talking about, let's say the common cold or the flu, the real problem and the reason we have so many variants of COVID is when somebody's sick for a long time. It doesn't matter if they eventually die or they eventually get better. It's irrelevant. The longer that pathogen is in their body, the more chances it has to mutate. All viruses have a chance to mutate. But on a long enough scale, the chance of it mutating increase. So it's going to have more mutation. And the more times it mutates, the more likely it is to become worse in some way. Right? And then you even have viruses and bacteria that will share DNA. So one might be resistant to this medicine, one might be resistant to another, method of your body fighting it, right? And they will share that, and all suddenly they've now gained that resistance from each other that they never had before by being in your body at the same time, by mutating, by trading, genomic information. So that is the problem with the, there's a great blue heron flying. Oh man, I wish I had my camera ready for that. That is amazing. That is great. Anyways, yeah, so this is why we're going over this one for the long-term ones, because especially the shorter ones like the flu and the cold that don't last very long, the longer they do last, the longer somebody has something like COVID, that's when you get the more likely mutations, and the more mutations, the more likely one is to be bad and make it more deadly, make it, more contagious, more virulent, So being infected longer is bad. So this type of HIV, HSV 1 and 2 are responsible for, herpes and cold sores. Okay. Epstein-Barr to Zika, the list of viruses associated with chronic ailments. SARS, CoV-2, post-acute sequela. So it's just, COVID-19, obviously, because that was when it started getting into the public consciousness about these sorts of things. Another long-term complication debated in this infection in early life. Some believe it predisposes you to asthma or wheezing later on. So yes. So obviously viruses can have lasting effects. Somehow alters your, your DNA, your genetic structure in some way. What your body does and doesn't realize is bad. But again, what I really wanted to go over, and it doesn't seem to be talking a lot about this in this particular, is the mutations and the effect that that has. Because that's really where we get the worst version of a virus is through those mutations, where even if something's bad, it can always be worse. So, so now we're going to look at the most dangerous bacteria in a dead body. So we were already talking about a dead body and how you can get these different things. So now we're going to talk about the most dangerous bacteria that's in a dead body. All right. Those that cause bloodstream infections, pneumonia, and gastrointestinal infections. So we got Vibrio vulnificus, a bacterium that can cause necrotizing fasciitis, a life-threatening infection that kills flesh around an open wound. So, literal necrosis. You literally have dead flesh there. Okay. Klebsiella pneumoniae, a bacterium that causes pneumonia, bloodstream infections, and meningitis. Well, that's one. Acinetobacter baumannii, a bacterium that can cause hospital-acquired infections. That's an interesting description of that. Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It causes tuberculosis. Potentially fatal lung infection. Other pathogens, Streptococcus, Middle East respiratory syndrome or MERS, hemorrhagic fever viruses such as Ebola. So there you go, Ebola, found in dead bodies. These pathogens can be transmitted through direct contact with the body, soil, clothes, or contaminated vehicles or equipment. We've already read that. So it probably draws some of this from the article that we'd already read. But I just wanted to look specifically at some of the more deadly diseases that are in a dead body. And, okay, so America's healthcare infrastructure, system thinking, enough's enough, way too much infrastructure. Okay, so I was looking for how basically delicate the infrastructure of our health system is. If it was infinitely scalable, which it isn't, but I was looking for something specific talking about that. Apparently, that's not something that we thought of enough to really, have thought of, I guess. And get a drink. So, yeah. So, like COVID, where our medical system, our hospitals and everything were overwhelmed, that's another big problem for diseases. Okay, so now we're going to look at the top 10 most dangerous viruses in the world. I've done something like this on that last before podcast, but it was the most deadly is what I said. So it gave me death statistics instead of what I wanted, which is the most dangerous or virulent, not necessarily the ones that have caused the most death. And for me, you kind of rate that by, what does it say, fatality rate. How often do you die from this? Some of it's because something's really dangerous and unknown. And so you get exposed to it and we really don't know how to treat it. So you're going to die because we don't really know what we're doing. And so you end up dying. And so if it only happens a few times, it's going to have a really high fatality rate. Or if it starts to happen a lot, that fatality rate will go down because we'll figure out how to treat it and what we're doing and what exactly we're looking at, how to identify it. So that's going to be the case in some of these, not all of these, but some of these. So, Yes, keep that in mind that fatality rates can definitely drop with knowledge, right? With figuring these things out, how to treat them, what they are, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. So the most dangerous virus is the Marburg virus. It is named after a small and idyllic town on the river Lawn. It sounds familiar. I think that's in China, but I'm not sure. But it has nothing to do with the disease itself. The Marburg virus is a hemorrhagic fever virus, as with Ebola. This virus causes the convulsions and bleeding of mucous membrane skin organs. It has a fatality rate of 90%. So if 10 people get it, one person's surviving. And one person surviving does not necessarily mean one person makes it out unscathed. They could still have serious effects from this virus moving forward in life. They could have a significantly shortened life. They just didn't die directly from this virus right away, from the infection, right? Okay, Ebola. There are 5 strains of Ebola virus, each named after countries and regions that it came from. The Zaire Ebola virus is the deadliest with a mortality rate of 90%. It is a strain currently spreading through Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and beyond. Scientists say flying foxes probably brought Zaire Ebola virus into cities. Which is a shame because flying foxes are just amazing creatures, and I really hate for somebody to go on a flying fox hunt because, there were some viruses, but that's exactly what would end up happening. All right, something else that I know of from an X-Files movie called Fight the Future, I think is what it was called, and that is the hantavirus. Describes several types of viruses. It is named after a river where American soldiers were first thought to have been infected with the hantavirus during the Korean War in 1950. Symptoms include lung disease, fever, and kidney failure. It does not give a mortality rate on that one. Well, this is definitely not good. Number 4 is the bird flu. Various strains of bird flu regularly cause pandemics, which is perhaps justified because the mortality rate is 70%. But in fact, the risk of contracting the H5N1 strain, one of the best known, is quite low. H5N1. I could have sworn it was H1N5, but I guess I got it backwards. H5N1. You can only be infected through direct contact with poultry. It is said, well, this is not true anymore. It is not. People have been infected through their pets. Their pets have been infected through other means, not necessarily being directly in contact with poultry, maybe directly in contact with other pets. So, yeah, it's not just direct contact with poultry anymore. It is said this explains why most cases appear in Asia, where people often live close to chickens. Which obviously it may be true that most of them are there, but we definitely have a problem everywhere right now. A nurse in Nigeria was the first person to be infected with Lassa virus. This virus is transmitted by rodents. Cases can be endemic, which means the virus occurs in a specific region, such as in Western Africa, and can reoccur there at any time. Scientists assume that 50% of rodents in Western Africa carry the virus. This is a place called DW.com, by the way, that has this article. The Juin virus is associated with an Argentinian hemorrhagic fever. People infected with the virus suffer from tissue inflammation, sepsis, and skin bleeding. It also does not give a mortality rate on it. In fact, I'm not seeing mortality rate on any of the rest of these. The Crimea Congo fever. Virus transmitted by ticks, similar to Ebola, so it's a hemorrhagic fever. Machu Po virus, associated with Bolivian hemorrhagic fever. Kaya Sanur forest virus, in the woodlands of the southeastern coast of India. Scientists say it's difficult to determine any carriers. It is assumed that rats, bears, and birds and boars could be the hosts. You will suffer from high fever, strong headaches, muscle pains, which can cause bleeding. So another hemorrhagic fever. Hemorrhagic meaning it causes bleeding for the most part. It can be, bleeding through the nose, through the butt, through the mouth, whatever. If it basically causes you to erupt in blood, essentially, it's a hemorrhagic fever. Dengue fever is a constant threat. If you're planning a holiday in the tropics, get informed about dengue. Dengue affects between 50 and 100 million people a year. But it's more of a problem for the 2 billion people who live in the areas that are threatened by dengue fever. Okay, so it sounds like it's a worse flu, essentially. We're now going to talk about zoonotic, which is mean that it's a disease that goes from one organism to another. So, zoonotic diseases, also known as zoonosis, are caused by germs that spread between animals and people. This is stupid. People are animals. Sorry for everybody who thinks people are somehow special and created different, and then we're not evolved from other animals, but we are animals. So saying between people and animals is dumb. Technically, zoonotic is not just between people and animals. It can be between one type of animal and another. So, even between, say, poultry and your cats and dogs is a zoonotic. It is now moved from one species that it was, specifically infecting to another new species. It is now zoonotic. Some people are more likely to get really sick after being infected with certain diseases. Well, no kidding. Animals may provide many benefits to people. Many people interact with animals, both at home, blah, 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 blah. Millions of households in the United States have one or more pets. Animals can sometimes carry harmful germs that can spread to people and cause illnesses. These are known as zoonotic diseases or zoonosis. They're talking about different diseases they carry, are very common, both in the United States and around the world. Direct contact, indirect contact with areas where animals live and roam, object surfaces contaminated with germs. Vector-borne, being bitten by a tick or an insect or a mosquito. Food-borne, eating contaminated food. That's like food with like some pet hair on it or something like that. Waterborne, drinking or coming in contact with water that's been contaminated. So if a dog has a lick of your soda or something like that, that can do it. So that's zoonotic, so that's really bad, and that's what's happening with the bird flu, is it's becoming zoonotic. Science.org, and it is Dirty Dozen, the 12 bacteria for which new drugs are most urgently needed. So let's look at these bad actors, shall we? Let's see where it goes down here. Okay. Doctors, researchers, blah, 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 level. The top 3 are all gram-negative bacteria that are resistant to multiple drugs. They aren't widespread yet, but they do cause severe, frequent, deadly infections in hospitals. With a so-called CRE or carbapenem resistant Enterobacteria acrae. These bacteria can cause deadly infections if they take up residence in the respiratory system. 9 more pathogens ran out the agency's Dirty Dozen, 6 listed as high priority, including drug-resistant strains of Neisseria, gonorrhea, which causes gonorrhea, and foodborne agents like Salmonella, Campylobacter. Bacteria in this category cause infections that are less deadly than those caused by 3 critical level bugs, but they are much more widespread. Okay, I was hoping this would give me an actual list of the diseases. It does not seem to do that. But I was looking up was, maybe this is it. Here we go. So I wanted to look up bacterial or viral families, because some of these are not like It's even mentioned in some other papers, a single virus, but are a family of virus a little bit. So we're going to call it here. The general point, of course, is that viruses and bacteria can be an apocalypse in and of themselves. You just look at the cat and trip scenario in Stephen King's The Stand. Only imagine that there's no survivors, because that was one single super disease, man-made, of course. But that's assuming that you're only exposed to the one, because when you're exposed to a huge number of them, even if there's one that you're going to be able to, get through and survive, you're going to die from a different one, right? When there's so many floating around and no real modern medical protections, this can easily spiral out of control and everybody dies. So extinction level event for us, for sure. And then obviously we talked about secondary, where it's the same exact thing, only it's caused by things that we don't normally associate with being something that's going to cause a bunch of diseases that's going to kill us all. So, yeah, something to think about. Again, all these are not to just tell you, hey, we're all going to die. There's no hope. Give up your hands. I'm not here to tell you how to solve it and get out of it. I'm simply here to tell you these things are here. They're heading our way. Of course, the whole point is we can stop these things. We can survive. We can move on to the next level. But we got to deal with them. We have to face the facts that they are here. We have to face the facts that they exist. And as long as we continue not to do that, or not to do it as an entire society and move in a positive direction, then we will continue to have these threats linger over us, if not actually come to fruition. And with that, will we survive our own apocalypse? Only time will tell.